Welcome. Welcome back. Thank you for joining today. It's been another eventful week on every possible level. I will share with you, however, as I expect many of you have responded similarly, my horror at the profound suffering of so many millions of individuals in the state of Texas. These kinds of catastrophes bring home to all of us, as if we needed one more reminder during this time of pandemic, the fragility of our lives, our dependence upon nature and its orderly unfolding, as first described in one of the foundational myths of our tradition, the creation story, and to revisit one of the central themes of this time, the existential uncertainty of the human condition, as much as we are able to ignore that most of the time. It also seems to be providing another lesson in this year of daily lessons, that our choices matter, that our choices, as we have become fond of saying, have consequences. The specifics of these lessons and of our choices will be examined, thoroughly discussed, and carefully analyzed, I am quite sure, in the days, weeks, and months ahead. It reminds me, however, of another foundational teaching of our faith, which recognized at the outset that our lives are determined by the choices that we make. In the myriad of small choices we barely think about, moment by moment, day by day, as well as the more major ones that happen throughout our lives. We are told quite clearly in the book of Deuteronomy that God puts before us continuously blessing and curse, life and death. And we are told emphatically and unequivocally, therefore, choose life. This is not necessarily an easy determination. There are situations in which the path of life is not clear or clear-cut. The underlying message of this dictum, however, is that choice is part of the human condition, and that when faced with options, the guiding principle must be what will ultimately enhance our lives and the lives of others. So before going on, because there is there are more reflections to consider. Let's take that big breath. Let's find our most comfortable and yet attentive positions. Let us put our feet firmly on the ground, our hands gently in our laps, on the arms of a chair, whatever is comfortable for us. Let us unclench them if we are unthinkingly holding on to something. Let us close our eyes if that is our practice, or just softly gaze in front of us. The point is just to adopt a slightly different attentiveness to the rest of the world. This is our time. And let us take that wonderful, big, full, deep breath. Let us hold it for a moment, feeling it filling our insides. And then let us choose to let it go. Slowly, perhaps. Dramatically, if you like, in a whoosh, an exhale about which you are mindful. Because that breathing in and out is with us all the time, and most of the time, we do not think about it. And by focusing our attention just on this elemental act that we do 24/7, How many times a minute? How many times an hour? Allows us to be right here, anchored in this moment in our lives, no place else. This breath that is coming into my body will not come in again. It is essential. It is supporting my life, but then it will go. It is a gift. With an awareness of that gift, let us really feel its power, its healing, its sustenance. I was struck this week as well by the approaching milestone of a year since we went into pandemic lockdown. This somewhat early acknowledgement is prompted by the arrival of our holiday of Purim this Thursday evening and Friday. If your memory is telling you that our response didn't happen until mid-March last year, you are correct. Due to the nature of the Jewish calendar, however, Purim is here somewhat earlier than last year. Last year, we celebrated Purim with the carnival and Purim Spiel on Sunday, March 8th. I remember that was the first time I actually held my breath, which is where this has all come from, as the reality and severity of the COVID-19 virus was just beginning to be understood and to feel threatening. In retrospect, it felt to me that we had truly dodged a bullet when subsequently no one became ill at what could have been a super spreader event. By that Friday, March 13th, we closed the building and did our first completely live streamed worship service. It was a few weeks later in anticipation of Passover and its themes of emerging from the narrow straits of constriction and limitation and bondage into the freedom of human realization and actualization, which is another foundational concept of our faith, that I started to offer these weekly breaks to breathe as an opportunity to join together and to access our tradition as a source of wisdom, guidance, perspective, and inspiration for this completely unprecedented time in our lives. As we are coming up on a year since that all began, I will share with you, as I began to do last week, some of the exceedingly relevant messages of Purim, which is a far more nuanced and sophisticated holiday than its child-friendly iterations might indicate. Purim has its own message of redemption that transforms this holiday from the purely juvenile atmosphere of raucous merriment in the service of make-believe, of heroes and villains, of three-cornered pastries and costume parades, into a far more complex and nuanced study of human impulses, instincts, motivation, and behavior. It is actually as hopeful as Pesach, albeit in somewhat more subtle ways. We started talking last week about the hidden and revealed nature of the Purim story, which finds a physical echo in the costume masks of this holiday, masks of gaiety that were so quickly inverted into masks of survival last year at this time. I'd like to share with you 3 phrases from or referencing the Megillah of Esther, the scroll of Esther, the book of Esther. They're all the same. The first comes from the exchange between Mordecai and Esther when Mordecai learns that Haman is planning the extermination of the Jews with the king's approval. He tells her that she must go to the king and plead for her people. Esther initially says that she cannot do this because no one may go unbidden to the king on pain of death. In response, Mordecai chastises her, assures her that in the coming slaughter she will not be spared, and then poses a question that speaks to the mystery of her position. Who knows, he asks, perhaps you have attained to royal position for just such a crisis. Mi Yodea, who knows? No one knows, and that answer may never be revealed to us, but the question remains. Esther certainly does not know, but it seems to motivate her to act, to choose to act, given what she does know, and in the face of the uncertain outcome that awaits her. Let us pause again and sit with that uncertainty. Let us close our eyes and take in that wonderful deep breath. And as we let it out again, this time, unlike other meditations, let us not breathe out the uncertainty, but let us live with it. Let us breathe it in. Let us sit with it, recognize it, see where it might reside in our bodies and in our spirits. If we peel away our mask of certainty, our mask of assurance, our mask of confidence that each of us dons every single day, sometimes with more success and sometimes with less. What is left is that uncertainty of life. It is what we practice in meditation. We can only take this breath. We only know this breath. Because the next breath, we can anticipate, but we cannot know for sure until we breathe it in. That uncertainty is our existential condition. Where do we usually feel it? Where do we usually know it? In the pit of our stomachs, in the tension in our necks, in our clenched fists, unknowingly clenching, possibly even in a clenched jaw, in grinding our teeth at night. In a stance. Do we bow under the weight of uncertainty? Do we rise and meet it face on, head on? Where is that uncertainty? Where does it reside? Can I live comfortably with it? there is a great deal of discussion among the rabbis concerning the fact that God is not mentioned in the Megillah. This creates some consternation because the book of Esther is included in the Hebrew Bible, the canon of our sacred literature. They are at pains then to ascertain how God figures in the book of Esther, even though never mentioned. Otherwise, how could the book be sacred? They find their answer actually in the book of Deuteronomy, in a completely different, unrelated context. Actually, in a place that preceded the writing and inclusion of the book of Esther. Deuteronomy 31, verse 18 begins, Va'anochi haster astir panai, which means, I will surely hide my face. God's countenance is hidden. The connection with the story of Esther is that if we look at the Hebrew for the word hidden, haster, we find that it uses the exact same letters as the Hebrew name Esther or Esther. Esther, then, is also one who is hidden. But in terms of God, the rabbis concluded that this means that while God is hidden in the book of Esther, God is still there. Let us pause to breathe with the idea of all that is hidden in our lives and in our world, and that which is revealed. How do we respond to either? What do they feel like? How do they impact our consciousness? The hidden and the revealed. And in a sense, they do mirror our breaths. The hidden is inside. The revealed is what we release to the world. There is so much in our daily lives, in our interactions, in our work, in our play, in our families, that is hidden. We might sense it. We might have feelings about it. But if we haven't experienced it directly, it is hidden. There is much that is revealed. One of the lessons of this time, however, is that even in what is revealed, even in what we know through one or all of our senses, there is still the hidden within it. The subtext, the deeper meaning, the deeper significance, the motivations we cannot see, the understandings that might elude us because we don't have the whole picture. There is that interplay. More frequently than we recognize, I think, between that which we know and that which is still unknown to us, or is known only through instinct and sensitivity and a heightened awareness that may not reach verbal expression. We live with that which is hidden and that which is revealed. The last phrase is one that I have found to be personally helpful and speaks to this time of uncertainty, anxiety, and fear. At the conclusion of her exchange with Mordecai, as an indication of her resolve and the uncertainty of the outcome, Esther says, V'ka'asher avadati, avadati, which means if I perish, I perish. I learned this phrase in grade school and it became a kind of mantra for me. Not that I would literally perish, God forbid, but that when faced with a difficult task or responsibility or a test of some kind that made me fearful, after I did everything I could do to prepare, to be ready, to do my best, I could only go forward by acknowledging that the outcome was completely unknown and at a certain point out of my hands. I had to take a leap of faith. There are no guarantees, and if I failed, I failed. V'ka'asher avadati, avadati. Somehow, the acknowledgement of the very worst that could happen seemed to be reassuring, as if having looked squarely at the possibility of failure and the unknowability of the outcome helped me to manage the situation awaiting me. At times of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, when the world seems dark and foreboding, when we are unsure of even a friendly face, let alone God's presence, we develop skills to help us. Skills that are not the wonders and miracles of the Passover experience, but are the very human, finite, imperfect talents and abilities that Mordecai and Esther, like all of us, have at their disposal. The book of Esther is filled with intrigue, surprise, inversions, and a world that is topsy-turvy. The gallows which Haman erects for Mordecai becomes the gallows upon which he is executed for his heinous plan. The day which is chosen by lot, by chance, to end the Jews, becomes the day on which they revenge themselves upon their enemies. Mordecai, the man who stood in the gates of the city in sackcloth and ashes, bewailing the intended fate of the Jews, becomes the king's prime minister. Such a salvation is worthy of merriment, of celebration even, of the uncertainty of our lives as we become so inebriated that we cannot tell the difference between Mordecai and Haman. As Rabbi Irving Greenberg has taught, that is redemption for our time, because that is a redemption we can fashion. It is not in God's hands. Let us breathe once more. The talents and abilities at our disposal. Are there new strengths you may have discovered during this year of adjustment? What might they be? Don't minimize them as they have been your survival mechanisms, however modest or seemingly unimportant they have been. Are there habits you have developed that you will continue to practice? Are there endeavors you will continue to pursue? Let us breathe in the recognition of our abilities to handle what has come our way and the unrelenting uncertainty of its day-to-day unfolding. We have done this in very small steps, with rebellion, with argument, with resentment and resistance, we have done this. Let us breathe in that success and that redemption. I'm so sorry that has brought us to this time. Let us breathe in that victory that is ours uniquely alone. 1 year later, we have dealt with it all. Let us breathe that in. And we might simultaneously ask the questions. What are the things we habitually feel we need to hide? What would it feel like to have the safety to be our whole self, not hiding, not silenced, not compartmentalized, but bringing all that we are to every moment of our lives? What would it feel like to recognize that we are a reflection of the source of blessing, made, as our creation story tells us, in the image and the likeness of God? Not despite the things we usually tend to hide, but precisely and absolutely in all of who we are, uniquely, independently, resolutely. Let us breathe in the victory. Let us breathe in the questions. We are not who we were a year ago. How might our lives continue to unfold? As we continue our practice of breathing in and out, of being right here, right now, with all of the uncertainties and yet the victories and the humanity and the sensitivities. Let me bring us to a close with these thoughts. The Esther story reminds us that there's a time for hiding and a time for revealing. May we continually keep learning more deeply who we are and who we're becoming. When we choose to conceal ourselves, and when we choose to try on different faces, and when we choose to reveal our splendor and our light, may we be safe, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, when we veil and when we unveil, when we mask, and when we finally unmask this Purim and always. And if you care to remain one more moment, I will share with you a bit of Purim with Dr. Seuss. Queen begs and bam, or Vashti's lament, where it all began. I will not come before the king. I will not come for anything. Would you? Could you? In a coach? His Majesty, you must approach. I would not, could not in a coach, His Majesty, I won't approach. I will not come before the king. I will not come for anything. With a tail, would you, could you with a tail? I would not, could not with a tail, not on a carpet, not in a pail. I will not come, so please don't fret. I will not come on a jumbo jet, not on a horse, not in a coach. His Majesty I won't approach. I will not come before the king. I will not come for anything. Say, with a crowd. Would you, could you, with a crowd? I would not, could not, with a crowd. These pimples do not make me proud. I would not, could not, with a tail. I will not in a pail, not in a jet, so please don't fret. Not in a coach, I won't approach. I will not come before the king. I will not come for anything. I wish you a Chag Sameach, a happy Purim, and the strength and the resilience and the courage to continue on this uncertain life, this uncertain life's path together. God bless. I look forward to seeing you next week.